In a moment that is already being described as one of the most defining confrontations in recent Pan-African history, Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, issued a thunderous rebuke to South African political figure Helen Zille during a high-stakes session at the Pan-African Leadership Summit. With the words, "Africa will not be lectured anymore," Traoré drew a sharp line in the sand, sending a resounding message not only to Zille, but to all who represent a legacy of external interference in Africa's destiny. The summit, attended by over 40 African nations and a mix of former presidents, policymakers, youth activists, and civil society leaders, had been positioned as a crucial meeting to chart Africa's path forward in a world marked by shifting alliances, economic realignments, and resurgent neocolonial pressures. But it was during a panel on democracy, sovereignty, and the role of the West in Africa that the calm of diplomatic language gave way to fiery truths. Helen Zille, former Premier of the Western Cape and a senior member of South Africa's Democratic Alliance, began her remarks with a warning against what she called the alarming rise in autocratic regimes masquerading as liberation governments. Though she didn't name anyone specifically, her comments were perceived as thinly veiled criticism of military-backed leaders like Traoré, Mali's Assimi Goïta, and Guinea's Mamadi Doumbouya. Zille emphasized the need for institutional accountability, media freedom, and democratic continuity as foundational pillars of Africa's future, adding pointedly, "We cannot build a free Africa on the back of uniformed rule and populist rhetoric. The people deserve the same freedoms in Ouagadougou as they do in Cape Town." Without notes or hesitation, Captain Ibrahim Traoré rose to respond. Dressed in his signature military fatigues, the 36-year-old revolutionary fixed his eyes on Zille and began his now viral statement. "With all due respect, Madam Zille, Africa is not a classroom, and you are not our teacher. The era of being told what to do, how to govern, how to think, by those who once colonized and continue to exploit us, that era is over. You speak of democracy, yet your own institutions were silent while Africans were enslaved. You talk about freedom, yet you come from a political tradition that sat comfortably during apartheid, while men like Sankara, Lumumba, and Nkrumah gave their lives for liberation. So no, we will not be lectured anymore." The statement was met with thunderous applause from several delegations, particularly from West African nations. Leaders from Mali, Guinea, Niger, and even grassroots youth activists from Sudan and the DRC stood in solidarity, some chanting "Africa for Africans." Zille, visibly stunned but composed, attempted to interject, reiterating that her comments were made in the spirit of mutual progress. But by then, the tone had shifted. What had started as a policy dialogue transformed into a symbol of the broader ideological war dividing African leadership between those who seek African solutions to African problems, and those who believe in following Western democratic templates. Observers and commentators across the continent have weighed in, with social media erupting under hashtags like #TraorSpeaks, #AfricanPride, and #NoMoreLectures. For many, Traoré's bold stance represents the voice of a new, fearless generation of African leaders refusing to conform to outdated diplomatic courtesies. This is not just about Traoré and Zille. It's about reclaiming dignity. It's about refusing to be patronized. And it's about demanding that African leadership be respected, not filtered through the lens of European norms. The summit concluded with renewed calls for continental unity, economic self-sufficiency, and defense cooperation, but the confrontation between Traoré and Zille will be remembered as its defining moment. It exposed deep ideological divisions, but it also awakened a powerful undercurrent of African pride and resistance. In his closing statement, Traoré addressed the assembly one final time. "We do not reject freedom. We embrace it, but it must be our freedom, on our terms. Africa is not rising to please the world. Africa is rising to free itself." And with that, a new chapter in African political discourse was opened, bold, unfiltered, and unapologetically sovereign.